Hello, friends. I won't be cheering you up with news from Turkey today, but instead I'll be talking about what new taxes have been introduced, how much they've increased for obtaining property rights, the process of registering Tapu, and generally what the property registration process looks like at the moment. For those who don't know me, my name is Alexandra Sokolova. Since 2009, I have been living and working in Mersin, and on YouTube I delight you with new property offers. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do. I share interesting information and showcase great apartment options. So, as before, foreigners still need to carry out a currency exchange operation for the cadastral value, that is, the cadastral value. A bank account is opened. This amount, in foreign currency dollars or euros, is deposited into the buyer's account and exchanged for Turkish lira at the rate set by the National State Bank. A certificate is then obtained, which we call, and based on this certificate, a document is submitted to the Land Registry Office. What are the costs here? The bank charges a fee of 3,250 Turkish lira for the certificate. I'll speak according to today's exchange rate. For those who aren't familiar with it, as of today, the euro to lira rate is 43.5 lira for 1 euro. Therefore, I'll be giving you approximate prices in euros as of the time this video is published. So, banks are generally reluctant to open accounts for foreigners, but I want to emphasize that our clients don't face this issue. Accounts are opened smoothly for our clients. If you're buying from a developer or if you're buying on the secondary market, the situation may differ slightly here. If you're buying on the secondary market, you need to open a bank account and deposit an amount equal to the cadastral value, exchange it into Turkish lira, then receive the Turkish lira and, well, probably go and buy foreign currency again, because usually, in our experience, sellers prefer to receive payment in euros most of the time. Exchange rate loss, that is, the difference that arises when converting the cadastral value into Turkish lira and then converting it back to the original currency. Depending on exchange rate fluctuations and the amount of the cadastral value, this sum varies, according to our experience, from 600 euros to 1,000 euros. Of course, an exact calculation is required for each flat. This figure is approximate. If it's a bank statement, those are precise figures, but the exchange rate loss is only an estimate. Tax. The tax amounts to 4% of the cadastral value. In Mersin, not throughout all of Turkey, but specifically in Mersin, I should emphasize that the cadastral value is lower than the market value, noticeably lower, roughly 30, 20, or, at best, 50% of the market value is what the cadastral value amounts to. From our experience, we see that at present, cadastral values range from 500 to, say, 1 million or 1,200,000 lira for a flat, whether it's a one-bedroom or a two-bedroom. And we are observing a trend of the government indexing the cadastral value. In other words, taking inflation into account, they regularly adjust this amount upwards. Therefore, in the same building, we might register one flat at a certain cadastral value, and then a week or two later, that value increases, and accordingly, the owner pays 4% of the cadastral value. In monetary terms, the average tax comes to roughly between 25 and 50,000 Turkish lira. If we speak in euros, then it is from 575,000 euros to 1,150 euros. I should emphasize that this is calculated individually for each flat. Cadastral fee. Unfortunately, folks, this has gone up for us, and unfortunately, it's increased for foreigners. There is a difference here. With citizens of which countries is the transaction carried out? If the transaction involves a Turkish seller and a foreign buyer, then the cadastral fee is now 21,952 Turkish lira. That's 505 euros. By Turk, I also mean a Turkish developer. But if there are two foreigners involved in the transaction, that is, a foreigner as the seller and a foreigner as the buyer, then the cadastral fee, as it is called in Turkish, amounts to 38,581 Turkish lira. In euros, this fee is 887 euros. The difference, accordingly, between a Turkish buyer and a foreign buyer is that this tax is 382 euros more expensive. The so-called other expenses. Document processing costs up to 1,500 lira, which is 35 euros. Translator. A translator is mandatory for you if you do not speak Turkish fluently. I emphasize, 1,500 lira will cost you those 35 euros. An exception is also if you are not personally involved in the transaction in obtaining the title deed and someone else does it for you by power of attorney. For example, our clients often give us power of attorney to purchase a property, and we act on their behalf to obtain the tapu. So, in this case, a translator is not needed. However, you will need to pay for the notarial power of attorney. For the transaction, you will also need 2 photographs, color, white background. Printing them here in Turkey costs 300 lira, which is 7 euros. Passport translation. By this I mean a notarized translation of your passport, and it can only be done in Turkey. There's no need to bring translations done elsewhere, even if they're in Turkish, as such passport translations are not recognized. The cost of a notarized passport translation is 1,705 Turkish lira. That's 40 euros. And I'd like to emphasize that the Land Registry Office may keep this passport translation in their archive, just as they do with the power of attorney. The original power of attorney always remains with the Land Registry Office when the transaction is carried out. So, in total, our expenses, bearing in mind that I haven't included the power of attorney, came to 56,207 Turkish lira. That's about 1,300 euros, plus any exchange rate loss. If we want to register the tapu in 2 names, which is allowed. And I'd like to emphasize that in Turkey, the owner's consent is not required for the purchase or sale of a property. The difference will be minimal. The only difference will be where there will be a double fee in the bank certificate. That is, it's 3,250 Turkish lira, 75 euros. The difference will be, accordingly, a photograph is required and a passport translation will be needed, which costs 1,705 lira, 40 euros. So, for 2 people, it will be more expensive by 122 euros. If the transaction is being made between a Turkish citizen and a foreigner. Here too, as you've understood, there is a difference. If you are buying from a Turk, it will cost you 1,300 euros, plus the exchange rate loss, of course. If you are buying from a foreigner and you yourself are a foreigner, then it will be 382 euros more expensive, amounting to 1,804 euros, plus the exchange rate loss. If, you are buying property from a developer, it's the start of the season now, we're already swimming in the sea, we're already swimming in the pool, and at the moment, a lot of owners are coming to register their ownership. I urge all of you to obtain your title deeds if you haven't done so yet, because this is your guarantee of security. It's the official registration of your ownership. I'm always surprised why people, having paid the full amount a large transaction, still remain only with the purchase agreement. In other words, that won't save you from having to obtain the title deed. You'll still have to bear these costs anyway. So I recommend that you come over, it's a great season now, and get your title deed. In addition, if you are registering ownership of a property purchased from the developer at the construction stage, the developer also has the right to ask you to cover the costs associated with connecting the dual gas natural gas system to the complex itself. This usually costs around 8,000 lira, which is 184 euros. And obtaining the iskan. The iskan is the occupancy permit document. This also costs about 8,000 lira. That's €184. As for the time frame, the procedure takes a few working days from submitting the documents to receiving the tapu. That is, once all the documents and certificates have been submitted, it usually takes 2 to 3 working days for the document to be issued by the Land Registry Office. Saturday and Sunday, of course, are non-working days in Turkey. That's it. And if this procedure is carried out by the developer, it takes a bit longer, about a week to 10 days. So, if you're planning a holiday, if you're planning to come and see how your flat has been built or to accept it and at the same time register the ownership, just know that we are waiting for our owners, our buyers. We are happy to help you register your ownership. We will calculate the exact amount of expenses for you based on the cadastral value and an approximate estimate of any currency exchange losses. Is it expensive now? Is it cheap? How much does it cost in other countries? How much does it cost to register ownership in your country? Write in the comments. I would be really interested to read them, because I know that in some countries it costs nothing, while in others it's actually much more expensive. But in Turkey, this is what it costs at the moment. And in Turkey, there aren't really any indications or rumors that anything will become more expensive or cheaper, or that any new taxes will be introduced, and so on. In other words, in Turkey, things happen pretty much from one day to the next. So, from today onwards, we live by these rules, with these rates and these taxes. Please accept this as it is. So don't delay, come, register your property, leave your comments, and of course, give us a like. See you in the next videos. Bye bye.